Welcome into Training Camp Report presented by Ticketmaster. Casey Phillips here with senior writer and editor Scott Smith. As you can tell, we've changed locations.
Taking our show on the road.
That's right. We are on tour all the way up in New Jersey for joint practices with the Jets. So we have just arrived to the training facility, probably about 15, 20 minutes ago now. Just heard the air horn blow for the official start of practice out there behind us.
Heard the JETS. Jets
we heard their chant. It's official. We're here, and we actually also just a few minutes ago got to see Jordan Whitehead, former Buccaneer. He reunited with Carlton and Jamel. They had a nice little moment.
There was a lot of love there.
There was a lot of love.
Yeah.
You could tell they
Jordan's
were excited.
Such a great guy.
I know. I miss him. I'm glad he's doing well here, but we definitely miss him for sure. And we also saw the Hard Knocks cameras.
A lot of them.
A lot of them.
I believe
so
there's
many.
8 of them.
Yeah, that's what we heard. 8 cameras and
with
several
4 people on each.
Yeah, so
So
32
Hard
Hard Knocks people
presence, yes.
walking around.
I would like to avoid them, but I doubt that we will be able to completely avoid the Hard Knocks camera.
Yeah, whenever you see us hiding behind people, peeking out.
Hopefully we just end up on the cutting room floor.
Yes, I think that's a wise move. So, okay, now joint practices other than watching for the Bucs on Hard Knocks. So what do you think is the big thing that this team is wanting to get out of it, that fans can be paying attention to?
Yeah, before getting into specifics, I would just say it's good for the team from a mood standpoint, vibes. You hear the players talking about how they're just, training camp is 3-4 weeks of the same. Most practice scripts are the same from beginning to end, and you're playing against guys that, it gets competitive, but they're your own guys. So you want to play against somebody that it feels good to hit them. You know what I'm saying? They got the pads on today, and I think it'll be a pretty competitive and emotional practice.
I have to imagine having the Hard Knocks cameras here even maybe dials it up a little bit more when guys know that this is going to be seen everywhere as compared to a normal practice.
Right. Yeah, they'll be watching probably next week. Yeah.
And there's a certain someone named Aaron Rodgers out here.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
That's
that
right.
thing. And I'm sure there's a lot of guys that are very excited to try to tee off, even though you don't get to hit him, to claim that you got a sack or an interception or something.
The pass rushers, sure, but I think the secondary in particular, they were talking about that before we came here. They are very, very interested in going against Aaron Rodgers to see what they can do.
Yeah, and that's going to be great for the secondary. Because we talked about that when Brady was with the Bucs, that it was when you have one of the all-time greats to go against in practice, that's a big deal for getting your guys ready to go.
Absolutely, and they're keyed up for it, and that's why I said I think this will be a pretty high-energy practice.
Yeah, and so other than the whole Aaron Rodgers versus the secondary, what are some of the other matchups or individual guys, whether it's a matchup with someone against the Jets or just a guy that you think it would be really important to see this kind of practice for?
Well, if you look at the Bucs depth chart and what they're trying to accomplish and what they're trying to get ready for the start of the regular season, one of the biggest question marks, I don't mean it to sound like it's a big question, but it is new, is the state of the offensive line. There's nobody right now starting in the same place where they started at the beginning of last year. And so I'm not worried particularly about Tristan Wirfs over at left tackle, but you're talking about guys with not a ton of experience like Luke Gedeke and rookie Cody Mauch. And, we think good things about them. We've heard good things about them. It seems like they're having nice training camps so far, but it'll be good to see them get tested by another team and some really nice Jets defensive linemen like Quinnen Williams. So, I think that's one place you'll be looking. It's hard to necessarily when you're watching them practice to know exactly who's winning in those OLDL battles unless they do one-on-ones. And then the other thing I would say is this Jets team has both the reigning offensive and defensive rookies of the year. So Garrett Wilson against our really good corners, and then Sauce Gardner. A guy like Mike Evans, who's so competitive, is going to be wanting to win his one-on-ones with Sauce Gardner.
Those are going to be really fun. And also, we're talking about the offensive line, and a storyline that I'm not sure we knew we'd be talking about at the beginning of camp is the idea of Ryan Jensen. Is he going to be back? And then if not, who's replacing him? Because it does seem like now, at least for the moment, he is not back fully. We don't have a timeline yet on that or anything, but that Hainsey and Leverett are both competing for who would be his replacement if he weren't ready to go.
Yeah, it's a little bit, I don't think this is where we thought we would be right now. When training camp started and Ryan Jensen was not put on active PUP list, that was a really good sign that we thought we'd have him back for the start of the season, because you put a guy on active PUP so you can reserve the right to put him on reserve PUP when this regular season starts. The Bucs can't do that now, so if he's not ready to go at the start of the season, it's either going to be he's inactive for however many games until he's ready, or they'll have to put him on injured reserve after taking him through to the cut down to 53. If you put him on injured reserve before that, he's out for the year. So because we don't know at this point if he's going to be ready for week 1, and Todd Bowles says until a guy starts practicing, I'm just assuming he's not ready. Yeah, now you have Robert Hainsey and Nick Leverett, and the funny thing about that is both those guys actually started Robert Hainsey started every regular season game last year at center. Nick Leverett started the majority of the games at left guard. And as the depth chart showed at the beginning of training camp, it looked like those guys were going to be particularly good, experienced, high-end reserves, and now they're battling for a starting job. So it's just interesting how that's worked out, and apparently the competition is really close. Both of them, according to Coach Bowles, are good fits for this new run scheme we have, where they have to be able to block really well on the move. And so I don't know if there's a front runner right now. I think probably Robert Hainsey has taken more first-team snaps than Nick Leverett, but that is not what we anticipated, but one of the more important battles in training camp.
And then I know coming up on this next preseason game here, we know that Kyle Trask will be getting the start since Baker Mayfield got it the last game.
Right.
What are you looking at when it comes to how they're going to play, again, him and Baker Mayfield, and what that then again means for the offensive line you have out there, the wide receivers and other weapons, to try to get an even playing field for the two of them?
Well, I think they've worked really hard to try to make this, like you said, an even playing field for both guys, so you can judge them on their results and not say it was because this guy played with this group and this guy played with that group. So I would suspect that the way they play the game on Saturday will be pretty much the same, except the order reversed, where they both get to play with this. It's not necessarily all the starters, but they both get to play with the same group of offensive linemen, roughly the same group of pass catchers, and Kyle would get about the amount of time that Baker got in the last one. And since Baker had a pretty nice first start, he was mistake-free, made some nice throws on the run. I think Kyle probably needs to have a good start for him in this one to keep that battle as tight as it has been.
So other than Baker and Kyle, who are the either individual players or position groups that you think are the most important in terms of what we could find out in this preseason game and in the last two, that who really has the most to try to gain or lose or prove?
I think I would look at the wide receiver depth and the outside linebacker depth. The wide receiver depth and for two different reasons. The wide receiver depth because after your main three of Mike and Chris and Russell Gage, it's really kind of wide open and not a lot of experienced guys there except for David Moore, who had a nice first game. So how the rest of that unit shapes up, how many do they keep, and who's the kick returner, because that can make a difference for guys making this team like Devin Tompkins and Trey Palmer and Kalen Geiger. And then on the outside linebacker part, the issue there is that there's so much talented depth that the coaches are thinking they're going to have to cut somebody or a couple somebodies who are definitely NFL caliber players. So when you're talking about Cam Gill or Charles Snowden or all the guys down the depth chart there, how many can they force them to keep?
Right, and that's going to be tough. And I know we talked about the excitement of kind of the first-string corners and wide receivers going against the Jets' talent, but both of those positions are so interesting in terms of we know who your starters are, that's not a question, but the rest of those position groups, to me, are also ones that are just going to be really interesting to watch, both for special teams, but also their play on the field of who your slot guy is, who your backup outside guys are, and same thing with the wide receivers. After your top three guys, what do you feel like are the people that you're most excited to watch at those two positions?
Well, first I would say the keys there for those guys, and you mentioned one of them, are what can they do on special teams and also versatility. And that's particularly important at the defensive back positions. I take a guy like D. Delaney. That's a guy I'm keeping a close eye on. He's been on the roster for all of the last 2 years, and I think one of the main reasons is he's shown a lot of positional flexibility, and you can put him out there and feel comfortable at outside corner, at slot corner, at safety. So guys that can show that kind of positional flexibility, I think, really have a leg up in the competition. And then at receiver, it's what can you add on special teams.
And I know we had talked a lot about wanting to see what Coach Canales' offense would look like. We did finally get a game where he was calling the plays. We all know preseason is not when you unveil all of your tricks and everything. But do you feel like you learned anything, or just what have you heard even about him talking about getting to call plays, as we've all heard, for the first time since he was calling it for JV?
I think for him it's just getting comfortable doing so, but definitely I don't think you can make a lot of judgments about what the offense is going to look like based on just the first game and probably all of the preseason games, because as Coach Bowles described it the other day, it's very much a vanilla game plan. To give you one example, the short yardage plays didn't go particularly well in that first game. I think we missed a third and two on the first drive and a 4th and 1 around midfield later in the game, and all we did kind of was run Keyshawn Vaughn up the middle, and that's not really the way they're planning on doing it.
Right.
We talked about this the other day. They're going to come up with a suite of plays that they're happy with. But in terms of just overall the mechanics of the play calling and getting the plays in and everybody being comfortable with how that process works, I think they feel like it went well. Coach Bowles felt like Dave Canales called a good game. He just doesn't have the whole playbook open to him right now.
And then we'll close with this. The defensive side of things, we end up actually having something to talk about with play calling there as well. After Todd Bowles has done it for several years now. Now that he's the head coach and it's his second year, he's giving a couple guys a chance to call. So tell us a little about who called last week, who's calling this week, and what that might mean.
So Larry Foote called the plays last week, and he's the insider off-ball linebacker coach now. And Casey Rogers is going to get to call it this Saturday against the Jets. And I think that maybe that's a twofold kind of thing. One, I think Todd, like a lot of head coaches, wants to give his guys opportunities and wants to help them advance their careers. So giving them a chance to call plays and seeing how that goes, and maybe someday in the near future, they're calling plays for somebody. Or also, I guess, Todd wants to see how that goes. You're the head coach, so which responsibilities do you want to take on? If I'm not calling plays, does that make it easier for me? Does that give me more time in my head to make strategy decisions during the game? And you don't know that until you try. Todd has said at the moment he still plans to call the plays, but it is a possibility that he'll pass that duty on to somebody else. So this is where you test it out and see. Maybe he sees, wow, these guys are good play callers. They're doing it the way I would do it anyway, and not having to do that frees my mind space up to make some other decisions during the game.
All right, well, that's going to do it for us on Training Camp Report presented by Ticketmaster. We're going to head on over there to watch practice so we can fill you in on all of it. So enjoy seeing the coverage of the rest of this week we have up here in New Jersey and the game on Saturday.